Hello, Sit Room executives. Today, we have Gino Barbaro, an investor, business owner, and entrepreneur of 25 years that has invested in over 1,500 units and $100 million in assets under management. He is the co-host of Wheelbarrow Profits and the author of multiple books, including the most recently released one called The Honeybee, a business parable about getting unstuck and taking control of your financial future. Gino and his business partner created a framework that entails 3 pillars of real estate investing: buy right, manage right, and finance right, which has propelled him and his company to massive success. Gino delivers incredible value in this episode, so make sure you listen carefully and take copious notes. It is really a pleasure to have Gino on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Dion, thank you. It's just amazing that I'm here and I've been able to make money in real estate and teach us how to do it. I mean, it just really is amazing where you just start out, you get the clarity, and then you just make it happen, right?
Yeah. And we had a bit of a conversation here earlier, and I mean, you're very experienced in the business. You've been doing this for over 10 years right now. And so tell us a little bit about your background and how you transitioned into real estate.
So, Dion, I think I'm going to shatter a lot of your listeners' limiting beliefs because it's all about not having enough money, not having enough experience, not having enough time, right? Money, experience, time. So, everybody get ready. I'm a father of 6. So right then and there, everyone's going to say, well, where do you find the time? You find the time because you're really sucking at one part of your life where you hate it. You get clarity, you get personal development, you go to coaching school like I did, you figure out what your why is. And then when you figure out your why and you have enough pain, moving away from pain, you'll figure out how to do it. And where was that pain in my life emanating from? It was emanating from a restaurant that I had with my brother. I was in business for over 20 years with him. The business shifted in 2008. You know, Dion, you weren't the only one who was hurt back in 2008. We were all hurt. I mean, the paradigm shift was going on with technology, you know, with all of a sudden people delivering food and eating habits are changing. And I just was making less money and working harder. And I said, how am I going to support my family? And that was my pain right there. So I was fortunate to meet Jake back in 2009. He was working out of the restaurant, getting catering out of the restaurant for his W-2 job. He was a pharmaceutical rep. And everything shifted, right? All of a sudden, healthcare shifted. The Sunshine Act is coming in. He's like, am I going to have a job next year? He ends up moving down to Knoxville, Tennessee. And I say, Jake, when you get down there, let's start underwriting deals. And back in 2011, I don't know if your listeners remember, 1% GDP growth. I mean, everything was terrible. So is it ever the right time to get into something? What are you getting into? It wasn't the right time back then. Rents were $350 for a 1-bedroom apartment. Now they're $650, $700. So back then values were a lot lower because the sentiment was lower, NOI was lower. So Jake and I, we partnered in 2011 and it took us 18 months to find our first deal. There is the no experience, right? So for us, it took a long time to get that first deal. Staying involved, learning, that education. I always say education times action equals results. And finally, ultimately, the last piece of not having enough money, you either partner with somebody, do some owner financing. We had owner financing on our first deal and our 4th deal. You can use the syndication model. There's so many different ways of getting into multifamily, but if you don't take that education piece and you don't know that, and you don't in life and especially in investing, what you don't know, you don't know. And unfortunately for us, we have 1,000 units by ourselves. We've been able to syndicate an additional 500. I would say if we knew syndication earlier, years ago, we probably would have employed that. We probably have 3,000 units now, but it's okay. But I'm just telling the listeners out there, if you really want to get into multifamily, you really have to find a mentor or somebody who's doing it. Follow them, learn what they're doing, and just go for it.
So, Gino, you just mentioned that your first deal that you did was in Nashville, right?
In Knoxville.
Knoxville, apologies. And you said that was an owner financing deal. Now, I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people out there, you know, and I've seen questions online. They're always like, "Well, how do you get them to owner finance?" You know, I always hear that question. How do you get them to owner finance? So, could you just touch a little bit on this?
Sure. What I would tell listeners out there really, the first thing you need to do is learn the art of negotiation. And every skill out there is learnable. You're not born a natural salesperson. You're not born a natural negotiator. You may not like sales, but it's a pretty easy skill to learn. I mean, I love the quote in the book, Same Side Selling, finding impact together. It's just like the art of negotiation. What does the seller want from you, and what can you offer the seller? That's the first thing. If you're looking at an A-class property, you're sitting in a beautiful building right there, you probably can't owner finance that building because they're not motivated to sell. The first thing you need to do is look for a mom and pop. That's what we look for. We look for mom and pop sellers. They come in different shapes and different sizes, but you need to listen to what the seller's trying to do. Is that building hard to finance? Is there problems with the building? Are they motivated to sell because they're going through a bankruptcy? They're really burned out. There's problems between the family. Like me and my brother, let's say we're fighting in the business. That's a mom and pop right there because we're motivated to sell. Do they have systems? This first property we bought, they were weekly renters. They were going, "What's your name?" "Oh, okay, you're in." So the tenant base was terrible. They had no application process. They were just completely burned out. They were running like a weekly rental there. It was horrible. So for us, we didn't know what we were doing. We said, you know what? This looks like a good deal. It was 25 units. It was scattered site, but there was a lot of meat on the bone. They were paying for their cable. The garbage bill is excessive. So these mom and pops traditionally are value adds, but they don't have to be these old dilapidated properties. They can have, owners and partners that are fighting. So the first thing, just look for some motivation, some type of motivation in that ownership, whether it's a management play or it's a value add play, or just basically people who are just frustrated and want to get out of the business.
So I take it that some of the other deals that you did as well had some owner financing components to those. So do you find that when you're working with these owner financing scenarios, do they typically have any requirements for you as the investor?
Well, Deanna, it's a great question because a lot of these sellers don't even know owner financing. I mean, and our coaches are talking right now with our students. There's a lot of deals out there, especially these small units, 10, 20, 30 units. They're coming back in flavor. It's very difficult to owner finance a deal at the height of the market if you're in expansions or hyper supply, but there are deals out there if you look for them. So what you need to do as a student or as an investor, learn the model on how to owner finance. We could have a podcast just on the owner financing, but what you need to do is find a broker who can understand it, and then find a seller who you can educate. I mean, obviously there's certain questions you need to ask. Dion, if you're selling a property and you have all equity in the property and you're getting $1 million, and I say, Dion, what are you going to do with the money? You're gonna be like, you know what? I don't really want to pay taxes and I'm just going to put it in the bank. Well, Dion, how about I give you a note at 5% and you're going to defer some capital gains? That may be really attractive to a seller like Dion. So it's all about framing. And I'm not going to lead with seller financing, but you never know what the seller is up to. So you need to know what the seller is going to do with the capital. And especially these folks, they were older. So what were they going to do with the money? They just wanted some income. And since rates are 0.5% to 1% in the bank, we offer them a 5% interest rate. It's 5 times what they're making, right? So plus, and they're not getting all those capital gains at once. So for a seller finance note, if you want to get into the specifics, you want a longer amortization. I mean, interest rates right now are like 3.5% on a 30-year AM, and with agency. So if you offer them 4.5%, 5%, you can get a good interest rate. Maybe some interest only. You can work in a little interest only for 6 months if you're having problems. There's not enough income coming in. Obviously, you want something that says no prepayment penalty, because basically, if you want to sell that note or get rid of the note, you can just pay the note down, whatever. So I would look at those right there. Make it as flexible as possible. No prepayment penalty, obviously. And also, if you're selling the note, make it assumable, because if you're selling the property, the next person can buy that note also. So they're out there, and you just have to educate yourself on how to utilize them. And like I said, don't lead. Don't lead with it, and educate the seller. Bring value to the seller and obviously to that broker.
So what do you see in your experience? Because I know you also have an educational platform. And so what do you see a lot of new investors, like some common mistakes that they're making?
First thing I see a lot just in life in general is the shiny object syndrome.
Mhm.
Crypto, single family home, mobile home parks, commercial, master lease. Just please pick one niche and really learn it well. I was fortunate for multifamily because I didn't want another job. I didn't want to fix and flip. It looks sexy. I love watching HGTV. My kids all watch it with me. We love looking at Zillow and looking at prices of homes in our area. But for me, I already had the job at the restaurant. I wanted something passive. So I went all in on multifamily. I first started out with a mobile home park, and that was a disaster back in '06. And it wasn't because of the investment. It was because I didn't have my due diligence. I didn't know what I was doing in that space. Then I went and bought a strip mall because that was sexy. It was right up the street from me. It was 30 minutes from my house in New York. I bought that at the wrong part of the market cycle, and I just didn't understand that, you know what, rents are not going back up there. The demographics up there are not New York City. It's up about an hour and a half away from New York City. So for me, it was all about focusing on that one niche. Please just stay in your lane. If you're trading crypto, get really good at it. And then once you get there, for me, it's all about the earned income, portfolio, and passive. If you can turn your earned income into passive income, and how do you do that? You can start becoming an investor, and then turning that money into an LP, start investing in syndications, but you still need to know how to underwrite deals. You still need to know how to pick a market. And that's the second thing. I think beginning investors, when they start, they don't know how to select the market, and they're trying to select 3 or 4 or 5 different markets. Is Cleveland, where you're born, a good market? If that's your backyard, it's a linear market. You're never going to get a ton of cap appreciation. But what's your strategy? Your strategy probably is cash flow. So what I would tell the listeners out there, we talk about the 3 pillars of wealth, the 3 pillars of real estate, the 3 of them. Think of this. You need to know what the market cycle is, what your debt is, and what your exit strategy is. If you don't know all 3 of those, I guess Cleveland would probably be in, would you say it's the expansion phase? I mean, recovery / expansion, not sure where, but if you know where it is, then you'll know what type of asset you're buying. If you don't know your exit strategy and you say, I'm going to flip this in 3 years, that's fine. But what kind of debt are you getting on it? That's the third component. So if you need to know all 3 of those as a beginning investor, and most seasoned investors don't know that, because they'll go into a deal and they don't know what their time frame is. They don't know. They're not thinking of the end in mind. Why am I buying this property? So for Jake and I, when we started buying him, we wanted to buy and hold forever. And that's what we wanted to do. We started cost segregating them. And now that we see where the market is, maybe we're going to start shifting and selling a couple of these assets, because the return on equity right now that we've built up is really minimal. We can put that money into another deal. The only problem is, whatever you're going to put money into another deal, they're hard deals to find out there. So you're not really going to get a great return on the newer deals. So really know those 3 pillars, select the market, and just select one. Because if you're selecting too many, then all of a sudden you can't build relationships with brokers. You will not know that market. You won't know what the expenses are to run the market. You won't know what property management companies are out there. And I think the other thing is really focus on it. And this is the long game. Most beginning investors, after 2 or 3 months, they're like, there's no deals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't had deals in months either, and we've been in the market for a while. So it really is the long game. And if you're out there, and I think, Dion, I think the last thing I could say about this, I could talk about this for a while, but you need to go out to the market and you need to do property tours, because it's great you're calling the broker, but you know how many brokers in Cleveland are getting calls from investors in California? A lot. They don't want to go out for coffee. They want to go do property tours. So call the broker. We have a credibility book that we teach our students to make. It's all about listing your properties, your business plan. Go out there face to face with that broker, walk properties. I'm going to tell you, the first couple of properties they send you are going to be crap. That's okay. Tell them why they're crap. Share your underwriting with them. Go visit those properties. And then, you know what? You start building rapport. And then sooner or later, deals are going to start falling in your lap. And that's how it goes. But it's going to take a little while. And that's why I think students in the beginning, they feel, I guess, I don't want to say disgruntled, but they're thinking that, well, I'm going to get all these deals at once. It takes a while to build it. And then all of a sudden, after 18 months, like Jake and I, we got our first deal. Then 3 months after that, we got our second deal. Then 6 months after that, we got our third deal, and we were off to the races.
So I have a follow-up question, actually. One thing you had just mentioned was regarding the hold period. And you said that originally, you and Jake, you guys were thinking, I'm just going to hold forever, and this is like, ongoing cash flow, generational wealth type building. And some investors typically may not have a period, in mind as far as when they're going to exit. So how do you find a balance between that?
What I would say is, each model is different. When you're buying and holding for yourself, you have a little more flexibility, because our first property, Jake and I, we didn't have to worry about paying investors. Septic field went out. Someone passed away in the property. We had issues going on. If we didn't get paid that month, Jake, we're not getting a draw that month. When you syndicate, you really need to be crystal clear, because you're taking investors' capital, and you really need to know you can be flexible. On our first syndication, we bought it in November of 18. We're looking to exit now. I mean, it's 14 months later. I mean, the IRR is going to be 40% because we've done superb. Now, if that was our deal internally, just me, Jake, and Mike, we would probably refi that deal and hold it, right? But since we have investors, we want to do a full cycle deal. We want to give all that money back to the investors and show that we've got a really big home run and maybe utilize that and move that capital to another deal. So for me, it's really being crystal clear on what you want to do. And like those different strategies, when you're buying for yourself, you have a little more flexibility. But it's all about the debt also. So if you're going to get long-term fixed rate financing with yield maintenance, it's really prepayment penalties really, it's going to hurt. So if you want to exit after 3 years and you've got a ton of money, you're going to pay a big prepayment penalty. Maybe you get that step down, pay a little bit more for the rate, but have that flexibility to say, you know what, if I've made a ton of money after 3 years, it's like, wow, because we're all trying to time the market. And I think one thing that everyone has to understand is you don't lose in real estate until you have to sell. So if you can hold on and buy that property right, it's all about our proprietary 3-step framework: buy right, manage right, and finance right. If you can buy that property right and you have that long-term fixed rate financing, let's say year 3 of this hold, all of a sudden we go into recession. If you don't have to sell and you can pay the mortgage payments, you don't care what that property is worth. You can ride out that part of the cycle. And that's what happened back in 08 and 09. I think a lot of investors had their debt come due and all of a sudden they can't refinance it and they're in a hole and they're not paying it. And that's how they lose it. So really get focused on what you want to achieve. For me and Jake, there's a certain core part of our assets. We'd love to hold them. We bought them at the right price. We've cost segregated them. They're cash flowing really nicely for us. The syndication, we'd like to go to a model where we're just going long term, where we're possibly doing a return of capital to the investors and holding that long term. Now that's not for every investor, but that's okay because you can't please everybody. I like that model because we just podcasted a gentleman named Sam Freshman. If you can see, he's got that red syndication book. Really cool model. And, someone who's been doing it for 50 years, he's in his 80s, seen 6 cycles. His biggest mistake was he sold his properties. Like we just talked about, the gentleman from the 70s, $30,000 property, it's worth $12 million. Yeah. If that gentleman had held it, all of a sudden he's got no mortgage, he's cash flowing really nicely, and he's got no debt in the property. So he could sell it whenever he wants. So it all depends on, where you start and what your goals are ultimately.
And when you just mentioned and I guess to clarify for some people that may not be familiar with this, but when you mentioned the return of capital, basically, I think that what you're talking about is a refi scenario, right?
Yeah, well, what happens is if you put $100,000 into the deal, Dion, all of a sudden, me as the general partner, I am not getting any capital until all of yours is returned. And then once your $100,000 is returned, we go to a model where we share 70-30 or whatever. So it's a really cool model if you think about it. We haven't employed this yet. We're still doing our research on it, but it seems very attractive to us. And I think our interests align, the investor and the GP, because I'm trying to get your capital back to you as quickly as possible. Then you have no money in the deal. Then we go to a split. So it may take 6, 7, 8, 5, whatever years to get all your capital back to you. I'm, as the GP, not getting any cash flow. You're getting it all. I may get some acquisition fees on the front end and I may get some asset management fees, but the rest of it goes back to all the investors. And then we go to a split model. So to me, that sounds attractive. You're always trying to align your interests with your investors and with the people running the deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So when in your experience, I'm sure you faced a lot of challenges and things that have come up. So can we talk about, maybe 1 or 2 notable challenges that you've encountered in your business?
There's a lot. I think everyone has to just write these 3 things I'm going to say to you. It's really important. I learned this through coaching, and it really made me understand you don't want to grow just for the sake of growth, right? Everyone's out there and they want to get 5,000 units or 7,000 units. To me, it's revenue is vanity, profit margin is sanity, and cash is king. Mm-hmm. Think if every business investor can learn that. It's not all about top line revenue. It's not about how much you're grossing. My dad, an Italian immigrant, he always says, not what you make, it's what you keep. Right. And to me, that always stuck with me. Even with the small restaurant, we didn't grow. We should have grown, but we were doing pretty well at the time. So don't grow for the sake of growth and pull it back. And when you're underwriting deals, stick to your criteria. Obviously, as markets elevate and cap rates compress, you have to change those criteria. But don't, as my coach, one of my coaches say, pencil whip a deal. Don't make the deal work just because you're desperate and you have capital, that's when we make mistakes. So for me, that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned. We lost in a lot of deals. We probably should have bought more deals 2, 3 years ago because we just didn't see where the market was going. But I'd rather, for me, Dion, my always saying is no deal is better than a bad deal because I've been in a couple really bad deals. They are soul sucking. And it's not about the amount of money you lose. It's the amount of headache and the amount of time where you're focusing on that deal and you're not focusing on other opportunities. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're struggling and not finding deals, you're not the only one. Fall in love with your actions, not your results. If you can fall in love with the action of picking up the broker, getting on a podcast at 8 o'clock in the morning, talking to investors, talking to brokers, walking deals, if you love that, you're going to get a deal. You're ultimately going to get those deals. But if you're focusing on just 100 units or 300 units this year, and then when you don't get it, you're going to feel really upset, really pissed off, and you're not going to continue those actions. So for me, fall in love with the actions, fall in love with what a multifamily investor needs to do. You'll ultimately get those results. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you just reminded me of something. Excuse me. I was talking to an investor the other day, and he kept saying to me, well, he's new to multifamily syndications, but he's invested in like single family and whatnot for like 30 years. But anyways, he was saying to me, got to get the first deal no matter what, got to get that first deal this year. And he's like, in a lot of the deals, he asked me to do the underwriting and everything to help him out with that. And a lot of the properties he's sending me, I'm like, look, man, these numbers, they're not going to work. They just don't make sense, But the feeling that I keep getting from him is it's like, well, it doesn't matter. How can we make it work? We got to make it happen. Well, now I'm just manipulating the numbers just to make it look good, And like you said, and he's not the only one that I've spoken to that has this mentality. There are some others that I've talked to before as well, and it's almost kind of scary, when you think about it. I saw a post the other day from I think it was Neil Bawa, and he said that he feels that this aspect of the multifamily industry is exhibiting irrational exuberance. And he said it's the new people that are getting into syndications, the new money coming in, that are doing these things, and they're just doing it just for the sake of getting the deal. And they're not, following like the advice that you just said, maintaining that rationality when they're looking at the deals.
Well, it's funny because sales is all about emotions. Once you get your emotions into it, and you don't look at things logically. It's really hard. People do have different criteria for underwriting. I mean, there's a lot of 1031 money right now. So if you've got a big capital gains and you want to roll it into a multifamily and save that, I mean, that's how do you underwrite that? That's a big. If you're getting a 3% cash on cash return, but you're saving, 20% of your taxes, I mean, that's what people are doing. That's one of the instances. The other instance is cost segregation. I don't think people talk about it as much, but cost segregation is huge. I mean, if you're breaking even on a property, but you're saving on taxes, I mean, what's the rate of return on that? So there's a lot of tax benefits for that. And another one is people are just preserving their wealth on these A-class properties. They're just putting money in there. They don't want to have money overseas where, a virus can come out and wipe out your portfolio. They want to preserve their wealth. So they're overpaying for these properties, holding them for the long term. You have family money going into this, office money, and you have all different types. And obviously, overseas money is huge. You have money coming from Asia and Europe where they have negative interest rates. Multifamily doesn't exist there. So obviously, there is a rational exuberance. But we had spoken also offline. You're talking about the demographic shift. And that's why people who are smarter than me are probably seeing this and going, well, there's more renters out there. The people want to be able to live overseas and work where they want to and then come back and rent. And that's what's going on in this country. And you have so much student debt out there that people can't even buy a house, number one. And number two, they're not like Gino having 6 kids. They're forming families a lot later in life. The people like Gino buy homes. People who are just single and want to live in what, Chris Porter says in his book, Big Shifts Ahead. He coined the phrase, the suburban area. It's really the suburban part of the cities where you have all the amenities. Why would you want to buy a house if you can live on top of a Whole Foods and hang out and go to the park and live in a suburban type setting? Why would you want to own a house? It makes no sense. So a lot of demographic shifts. I think a lot of the jobs are becoming really 1099s where people can work wherever they want to. So they don't need to plant their flag anywhere. And they like to be, transient, go from one city to the next. So things are shifting. And that's why I think multifamily, will continue to elevate. And the affordable housing crisis, there's
Mhm.
not enough units being built. I mean, and I'm not talking about like the Section 8. I'm just talking about the C properties. They're not being built anymore. They're actually getting older, but you have people that are, renting right now that there's not enough supply. And it all depends what market you're in. Obviously, in the Southeast where we are, whether it's Knoxville, Nashville, Chattanooga, we're in Louisville, Lexington, parts of North Carolina and South Carolina and Florida, people are migrating here. That supply is going to be strained. It's really supply and demand issue. So if the supply is not there and the demand is greater, you're going to see this elevation continue.
Do you see a convergence in like the numbers or the returns when right now, if you're looking at, let's say, like class B, B plus, and class A properties right now, to where it almost makes sense, like you wouldn't even want to buy the class B property at this point, you would just buy the class A property.
I think right now what people are seeing is that's why the market cycle. Why would I want to buy a four cap in Atlanta that's a C property when I can buy a four cap that's a B property, right? The problem with the older properties, and one of my coaches is calling it the capex tsunami. These properties built in the 60s and 70s, that might be the bubble right there because they may have a ton of capex requirements, and the bank might be saying, "Hey, listen, you need to fix the roof and that galvanized plumbing and the driveways need to be taken care of." So in this part of the cycle, we're actually looking at assets that are a little bit newer. We're looking at the maybe 80s and 90s build. They're going to be more expensive, like you said, but there's going to be less deferred maintenance, less capex requirements. Maybe rents are a little bit higher. And I think, I was reading Sam Zell's book the other day, and what he said is when the recession hits, and I've been talking about this for a year, at least a couple of years, you have these A properties. Well, those tenants can go from A's to B's. That's what they can do when there's the recession. And when they're making money, they can go from B to A and pay that money. But I've been thinking the overbuilding has been crazy. I mean, even in Cleveland, thousands of new units coming online. Who's renting those units when they're losing population? But I guess just the economy is still floating, and you don't know what's going to happen because something like we're experiencing now, coronavirus, can put us into a big recession, and all of a sudden things dry up. So multifamily really is tied to job growth and to the economy. So I think once the economy slows down and jobs slow down, that's going to affect the multifamily. But I would say right now we're trying to look for B, B minus C assets. The C assets more for not the age, but the location where you can put them up to a B, and they don't have those huge capex requirements.
Mm, okay. So if you were looking at a new person that was just getting started, right?
hmm
What would be, one key piece, excuse me, of advice that you'd give to them?
Well, for me, being a life coach, I would say to them, why are you getting into this? I mean, why multifamily? And once you're clear on that, for me, I could give you tons of reasons, but they're my reasons. I mean, it gave me the lifestyle that I wanted. It gave me the passive income, quote unquote, because I am, enjoying passive income for my syndications and even from the portfolio because Jake's doing day to day for the property management and I'm doing day to day for education. Really being clear on why you want to get into it. And then the next thing, honestly, I get coached a lot. We have coaches right now. I would really find a mentor. I'd really pay for my education. And when I say pay, think of it more as investing for your education. Success leaves clues. You can either pay to play or you can seek to serve. And I've done both before. But when you pay for something, you're more locked in. It's like being an investor. When you have skin in the game, when a GP has skin in the game, it aligns more. And when you're paying for something, you will take action. I can give you all the advice in the world. You may not take that action because it's for free. But if you're paying me and I tell you, Dion, analyze 3 deals, pick 2 markets, I'm going to see you next week. Guess what? Dion is going to analyze 3 deals and pick 2 markets, and he's going to call me next week. We're going to get on that call next week, and then we're going to continue down the road. But if you're all by yourself, you're like, you know what? So the accountability piece is huge. Investing in yourself is huge, and really knowing why you're doing this is really big because, we could do a whole podcast on why multifamily, and I think your investors intuitively know leverage, liquidity, and control. Those are the 3 things for an investor. Not as much liquidity on multifamily, but you can still refi. You can still sell a share of your property and you can sell the property, but you have the control and you have the leverage aspect, which are really huge for an investment.
So I know that you have a book out there called Wheelbarrow Profits. So can you tell our
hmm
listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. We have Wheelbarrow Profits, and we just came out with a book called The Honeybee right here.
Okay.
And The Honeybee is a parable. It's really a business parable that we wrote about creating multiple streams of revenue. complementary streams of revenue in multifamily. And you can take this into any business. The book is about a salesman, Noah, and Noah is struggling. He's a W-2 pharmaceutical sales rep, just like Jake. And he meets Tom, the beekeeper. And the reason why we call it the honeybee, bees are just like solitary W-2 workers. All they do is go out and make honey at the honeybee. The real person who makes the wealth is the person who owns the honeybee, which is the honey, which is Tom, which is the honey man, the honey person, we call him. And Noah learns, through all his journeys with Tom about creating multiple streams of revenue by starting out renting his basement, doing an Airbnb, and then buying a duplex, and then taking the process along, then starting a property management company, then starting a syndication company, then starting to do mortgages, and everything in Noah's life, like ours, it's all complementary. They're little rivers. Tom's house was called Tributary Acres. They're all little rivers. And then all of a sudden you start adding on those little rivers, and it takes years. It took Noah years, and it's taken us years. They become streams, and then they become a raging river. And the key is focus on your niche. If you're in multifamily, you can do the education, you can do the syndication, you can do the property management. Don't start buying car washes, and don't start buying different businesses that don't align, because in our business, we have students. Our students can invest in deals with us. We can get deals, we can get mortgages for our students. So the fact that they're complementary, it's an amazing thing, but starting out with that first deal is key. Once you get out with that first deal, then the sky's the limit. And it's really all about sharing that pie. It's a really big process. Like I said, Jake's doing property management day to day. I'm doing education day to day, but we help each other out. We can align our interests, and we can grow that pie.
Where can they find the honeybee? It's already for sale, right?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Just go to jakeandgino.com/honeybee. You'll see some videos on there. You'll see a couple of different what we've done with the honeybee. It's Audible. We've done some questions on there and answers on that honeybee page. You can buy it there, and then you'll see different resources. Like I said, we had our credibility book, so you can download a credibility book on there and start building your own.
And speaking of, how can people get in touch with you? You just mentioned your website, and how else would you suggest?
Just go to jakeandgino.com. You'll see all our podcasts there. Subscribe to our podcast. And my email is gino@jakeandgino.com. If you want to reach out, just email me. I love talking about real estate. I think real estate is a place where you can build a business. I could never fathom building a business in the restaurant. I just didn't know the tools. It's all about people, systems, and culture. I didn't know that back then. And it was just a harder business to scale. Multifamily, there's so many different ways to get into multifamily, which is exciting to me. It's a team sport. And once you learn that, you don't have to be all by yourself. And to me, life is all about relationships and connections. So you can make so many relationships and connections in this business. So just go visit the website and start listening to the podcast, read the books. And when you're ready, just hit me up at jakeandgino.com.
All right, Gino. Well, I really appreciate your knowledge and everything that you've shared with our listeners today, in taking time out of your busy schedule.
Dion, I really appreciate you having me on, and just want to thank the listeners for sharing part of the day with us.